Sonic Mania released in 2017 to universal acclaim, and it's not hard to see why. This is one of the most expressive, enjoyable platformers to date. In this video, I'm going to review all aspects of Sonic Mania and convey why I and so many others find this to be the greatest Sonic game. This game, like many before it, starts you off in Green Hill Zone, but rather than being a shameless rendition of this iconic landmark, there's now a twist, and that twist not only applies here, but to every single zone in the game. You see, the first act in each zone usually starts off by introducing the elements of the stage, but once you arrive in Act 2, everything, for the most part, is thrown out the window and a brand new mechanic is introduced. For example, here in Green Hill Zone, the first act is relatively similar to its Genesis counterpart, except with much more branching paths and secrets, obviously. But in Act 2, there are zip lines which are introduced out of thin air. This is genius because it constantly keeps the player expecting the unexpected. In Press Garden Zone, right out of the gate you'll find yourself surrounded by machines printing newspapers. This is one of the most aesthetically pleasing areas in the game, which in turn makes for a very enjoyable experience. Then, before you know it, you're thrusted into an absolutely stunning ice and snow themed world which focuses on breaking through objects while frozen inside a block of ice. This is by far the most beautiful 2D Sonic game, as every single level is drop-dead gorgeous, and even the reused levels feature brand new backgrounds and set pieces which enhance the stages immensely. I'm not kidding when I say my jaw was dropped in some parts of this game. I mean, just look at Stardust Speedway, or Studiopolis Zone. Now, Sonic games have a pretty infamous reputation of bringing back old levels in an attempt to act nostalgic or whatever. This in turn usually ends up in the original, new levels being hastily thrown together, thus not turning out that great. Well, Sonic Mania fixes that completely. Each brand new zone is fantastic, offering hundreds of secrets, pathways, and unique bosses to fight. Speaking of which, the boss fights are actually very memorable this time around. Most of them are completely original, and whenever they do bring back an older boss fight, it usually includes some sort of unique twist, such as this fight with Eggman in Hydrocity Zone. In Sonic 3, Eggman was the one riding around trying to inhale Sonic out of the water, however this time Sonic gets to hunt down Eggman. This was an absolute blast and just shows how an old concept can be fleshed out in its entirety in order to craft a brand new experience without changing much to the actual fight at all. Some of these boss encounters can be genuinely challenging, and something I actually don't understand is why you are required to completely restart the zone once getting a game over. It just doesn't make any sense, as you can literally be on the last boss fight of Act 2, but getting a game over sends you all the way back to the beginning of Act 1. This is honestly pretty archaic, and pair that with the 10-minute time limit returning for some reason, and it might cause a few people to put the game down. But I honestly highly advise against doing that, as this game is just so brilliant and all its flaws are far outweighed by all the positives. Now, one thing that almost every Sonic game always gets right is its music, and oh boy, Sonic Mania certainly doesn't disappoint. This is by far my favorite soundtrack in the franchise. As you may know, the incredibly talented T. Lopes created the tunes for this game, and he just blew it out of the water. Old soundtracks such as Green Hill Zone and Chemical Plant sound amazing, with brand new instruments used in order to completely change the pace of each stage. Lava Reef Zone Act 2 now uses an electric guitar, which totally changes the way this place feels. Sure, I loved the mysterious feel of the old choppy Genesis version, but this new rendition is nothing short of breathtaking. Every theme feels like it was perfectly crafted in such a way to match the speed of the level throughout the entire stage. Mirage Saloon perfectly encapsulates a feeling of being in an old western saloon, and who could forget Stardust Speedway Act 2? Wow, this is incredible. Nothing makes me feel like flying through a stage at breakneck speeds quite like this one. Music means so much to a video game, as to me personally, it can literally make or break the experience, so it's a huge relief knowing Sonic Mania got the love it deserved. I think the biggest reason this game succeeds so much is obviously due to every aspect I've discussed up to this point, however the centerpiece holding all this together really has to be the level designs themselves. As mentioned earlier, with each theme song perfectly conveying the speed seen throughout each stage, the actual layouts themselves are truly special. There is not a single stage, except maybe the last one, which forces you to slow down much at all. The developers really understood this time around what makes Sonic truly enjoyable, that being his speed of course. Nobody wants to play a Sonic game full of slow-paced movement and tedious navigation. This is why levels such as Labyrinth Zone, Marble Zone, and Metropolis Zone are so universally hated. It must have been a very difficult job trying to perfectly balance Sonic's speed with smart level design, which is exactly why this game is just that much more respectable. Not only does every zone contain the perfect amount of speed mixed with platforming, but pair that with the beautiful sprite work, gorgeous music, and stunning backgrounds, and you've got yourself an experience unlike anything ever seen before in the franchise. Sonic Mania makes Sonic 3 and Knuckles look basic in comparison, and before playing Mania, that was my favorite Sonic game, so it speaks volumes that this was able to dethrone Sonic 3 for me. For some reason, this makes me want a 2D Mario game, made by using pixel and sprite work, as I feel like a modern game using that art style could really please everyone who's bored of the new Super Mario Bros. Series by now, such as myself and many others. But that's besides the point, let's talk about performance. Sonic Mania runs at a crispy 60 frames per second. One of the biggest advantages to using pixel art is that since the graphics aren't highly advanced or anything, the performance has tons of room to truly shine. There was literally not a single frame drop during my entire playthrough from start to finish, so pairing that with the beautiful visuals and you've truly got a flawless experience. Another thing I really loved is how they handled bonus stages this time around. So passing through a checkpoint with enough rings actually brings you to the Blue Spheres minigame from Sonic 3, surprisingly enough. I didn't expect this on my first playthrough, considering, back in the day, accessing this minigame could only be found by finding giant rings. Well, those large rings return, but rather than bringing you to Blue Spheres, you now get to play through Sonic CD's bonus stage, which is really a nice twist. You can get Chaos Emeralds from playing this minigame, and just like before, it's once again a pretty challenging little game. Tons of fun though, and it just makes finding the emeralds more fun, so I definitely recommend you try these. Oddly enough though, you don't find any Chaos Emeralds from Blue Spheres this time. Odd choice, but still fun nonetheless. Now, one concern when this game was released was the decision to bring back stages like Oil Ocean and Metallic Madness, as these weren't the most enjoyable locations in their respective titles. But they changed them up so much for Mania, that they hardly even feel like the same places, especially Metallic Madness. Oil Ocean now gets covered in smoke, and you have to find these levers to pull down in order to clear the screen, and Metallic Madness adds these bouncers which can either send you to the foreground or background, which is genius. However, my personal favorite stage in the game is Studiopolis Zone. For starters, that music is so catchy, but besides that, the level design here is super exhilarating. And the theme here, obviously being a film studio, opens the way for so many Easter eggs and references littered throughout. It's also a beautiful level, including every color you could possibly think of. It's truly a treat for the eyes, and I'm beyond grateful that we got this. To wrap things up, I'm going to talk about the final area and boss. Titanic Monarch is the last stage in the game, and this can be rough, especially with the time limit. This was the only time where I really got frustrated, as I just got tired of repeating similar challenges throughout both acts. You spend most of the time just directing your way through these purple orbs, and the wonky physics can be pretty agitating. It's also super discouraging if you get a game over here, because then, you gotta restart the whole zone. But as for the boss, well, this is certainly a huge step up in difficulty. It's a super long fight that honestly goes on a bit too long if I'm being honest. It's still enjoyable, if not a bit confusing at times due to the sheer abundance of things going on at once, and constantly being teleported to another area can be disorientating, to put it lightly. But it really isn't too bad, and it feels super rewarding to take down Eggman this time. I also love how Knuckles is just sitting there waiting for you in this vehicle once you finish the fight. So that's Sonic Mania for you. A truly special experience unlike anything before it, and everyone deserves to play this game at least once in their lives. Here's to hoping for an eventual sequel, because I think if given the same amount of time and care as this one, then we can end up with something which surpasses the original. But that's it for me. Thanks for watching, everyone. See ya.